I guess like a good place to start is like how did you first encounter like Mark Manson, and how do you get in touch? How do you guys get in touch?
Well, so it goes back a long ways because I've been working for Mark for almost 7 years now. It's gonna be 7 years in just a couple of months, and I've been following him for probably 10 years or something like that, right? And so it was clear back in the day. Mark went through several iterations of his business, right?
Yeah.
He first started out giving dating advice, and he was like a dating coach, right? And he wrote the book Models, which is still like a bestseller in the men's dating advice and stuff like that. And that was, probably 10, 11 years ago when I first found him. And, I was just trying to talk to girls is what I was trying to do. And I found Mark's stuff, and it really, really, it resonated with me because it wasn't like the sleazy pickup stuff, out there. I never was into that. And he was just like, make yourself a better person. That's my dating advice, right? And I was like, that really was cool. So
that book is so good, by the way.
No, it really is. Yeah, we've come out with updated versions of it and stuff like that have been better each time, I think, and more succinct. And
it really is about like
making it better,
how to become like a better man, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is
no, definitely.
Thing, yeah.
And that was, looking back too, that was what I needed at the time, and that's what I think everybody, kind of in our generation needed or needs at some point, was to just figure that out. And I guess the way we do it now is we read books and blog articles, that's how we do it.
YouTube videos.
So that was, that was my introduction to Mark. And then, I was doing graduate, I was in academia actually originally. I was studying neuroscience and animal behavior and that kind of thing. I had a degree in psychology, biology, anthropology, that kind of stuff. I went to graduate school, and got my master's in neuroscience and behavior. I worked with monkeys, actually, believe it or not, and got done with my master's. And I was like, it was time. Everybody in academia is like, okay, what are you going to do for your PhD? And I was like, I don't know if I want to do this. So I kind of said, just screw it. And I went down to Santiago, Chile too. I was listening to your episode with Gerald, and he did the same thing. Right?
Yeah.
He went down to Santiago. And I wound up down there for a few months, came back with like $200 to my name, didn't know what I was going to do. And I get an email from Mark. I was on his email list, and it was like, hey, I'm hiring for some interns. We're going to go down to Colombia, right? And I'll pay you like $500 a month, but then I'll pay all your other expenses. And it's going to be a short-term gig and whatever. Anyway, I apply for it, and I get an interview. It's like 70, 80 people apply for it, but I get an interview. And the interview
what was the internship like position framed as?
God, I hardly even remember exactly what it was, because he planned on hiring 2 people. I think he ended up hiring 3 people. He was trying to build out, at the time he was running a site called Post Masculine, which was supposed to be like a men's development site and stuff like that, and he was trying to build out his forum and his community and everything like that. And a lot of it was going to be technical. Some of it was going to be internet marketing and stuff like that. And I had like almost no background in any of that at the time. And so I don't know why he decided, to take me. My application must have just stood out, or he decided to interview me anyway. And it turns out he was like, oh yeah, no, I'm looking for somebody else, not you. Sorry. So he ends up taking 3 people down there, and it's only for a few months, and
why was he going down to Chile?
He was in Colombia actually at the time, and he was just vagabond. He was doing the digital nomad thing.
Okay.
He really liked Colombia. He really loved Medellin is where he was, and he was just like, I want to live here. It's cheap. At the time, it was kind of up and coming on the digital nomad scene. That was 2012.
Yeah.
I think it was. Yeah. And so it was still kind of up and coming and cheap and a little bit still unknown at the time. And he fell in love with the place, and so they were down there when they did that. Of course, he rejected me. He sent me in the rejection email that he sent me. He said, if you had more experience in either installing forum software or whatever it was at the time, or internet marketing, maybe would have took a more serious look at you. And then, kind of a throwaway line, he said, maybe sometime in the future I'll have something else that comes up. Who knows?
Because your background at the, like your expertise at the time was really like doing research
it was scientific research. I was doing like experimental studies and stuff like that. It was all non-invasive stuff for anyone out there on the monkeys. When I was doing that, we did a lot of observational stuff on them. It wasn't invasive research on them.
Do you have any like a fun study you did back then?
I was really into we studied a lot of stress reactivity, and the way you stress out a social animal is you to separate it from its social group, basically, and that's enough to just get a stress response from them. So we did a lot of like hormone studies and stuff like that, where we just measure their reaction to a stressor like that. Take a monkey and separate it for a couple of hours or something like that from its family and see how they react. We did all sorts of studies on how like the family groups they would come from, if they had like, parents who took care of them, how would they react to the stressors and stuff like that. So one of the papers that I wrote during that time was based on that. And these monkeys, they had like the siblings would take care of the younger siblings, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't just they were monogamous pairs. So they had a mother and a father in their family groups, and then the siblings would also take care of them. These were marmosets, by the way. And so I looked at like across the board how does maternal care, paternal care, sibling care, all that kind of stuff. How does it affect their reactions to stress, like at a physiological level, so their hormones and everything like that. And found that definitely it's not just the mothers, it's not just the fathers, it's the whole family. It depends on how well they can adapt to stress, which is kind of interesting.
It's the tribe.
Yeah. So there's similar research that had been done like in rats, more experimental type research and stuff like that. And we were experimenting or trying to figure out, doing the research anyway on these monkeys to figure out, could this be like a model for human behavior or something like that? So yeah,
very cool.
So I had all that background. Yeah, and I had that kind of research background.
And you were teaching as well. Right? You were teaching like college classes at the time.
Yeah. So after I got my master's, after I came back from Chile with $200 to my name, I needed something to do. And so I reached out to some people at the university, and they were like, actually, yeah, we just had somebody leave and we need somebody to be an adjunct. And they were going to pay I think it was like $3,000 for the whole semester to teach this one class, which at the time I was like, hell yeah, give me, sign me up. That's awesome. And I taught research methods there. So like basically research methods in psychology, and overall general research methods as well too. Taught that to mainly like third and fourth year psychology students. Taught some statistics with that too and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I was kind of in the academic grinder for a while there, and trying to figure out what I was going to do at that time too. And that's when that internship came up. So yeah, that I didn't get.
Interesting. Okay. And so eventually you did work with him. So what was the gap in between? What did that look like, and why did he end up coming back?
That was 2 years later, and I had actually entered a PhD program by that time. So at that time, I'm living in the middle of Iowa. So I'm originally from Nebraska. So I don't know if anybody, if you've ever met anyone from Nebraska, there's not very many.
I actually wanted to ask you, because I noticed it's Omaha, Nebraska, which isn't that where Warren Buffett is from?
Warren Buffett's from there. I used to live 5 minutes away from Warren Buffett.
That's wild.
They talk about his home that he's owned since the 60s there, and yeah, we drive by and yep, that's Warren's house. He's never there, of course, but
did you ever try to run into him? Because I know he goes to the same McDonald's or stuff every morning, pretty much, right? Did you ever do anything like that?
I know. I was never that big of a fanboy, I guess, to try it. But he would come back, they'd have their annual meeting in Omaha, and he would come back. I know I had some friends who worked at restaurants downtown that he really liked to go to, and they'd wait on him and stuff like that. And yeah,
that's wild.
So that was kind of cool. Yeah. Insane though. Yeah. He's from just little Omaha, Nebraska. And I lived there for 10 years, actually. Went to school there and worked there for a while, and kind of that was home for me. I'm originally from small town Podunk, middle of nowhere, Nebraska, and so I think that's another thing people need to realize though too. I grew up in rural Nebraska, middle of America. Okay, it was not. I'm not kidding you. It was equal distance from the east to west coast where I grew up. I did not see the ocean until I was 20 years old.
Oh wow!
Believe it or not, I was 20 before I saw the ocean. So, and yeah, it was the middle of nowhere. It really was.
I really want to visit those places. Like on the opposite, like, I mean, I grew up in France, but like, as far as the US, I've only seen the coasts. And I feel like
most people have.
I haven't really seen America because I haven't really seen, I mean, really like 99% of it. You know, I've only seen the big, like New York, San Francisco, LA, like Austin, like the cities, you know? So that's something I really want to do.
You know, they call it flyover country, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of a derogatory term in the US, but there is a lot of, it's an interesting place to be from. I'll tell you that. It's because I have this kind of relationship with where I grew up it was actually a very good place to grow up. You know, we did all the small town things where we had community events, and we had, kids stay out by themselves past dark and nobody worries about it, that kind of stuff. You know, it was really, really a good place to grow up. Once I got outside of that and saw the rest of the world, then I had perspective on, okay, some of the stuff they do is kind of, weird or backwards, or I don't agree with, sure. But I have this very ambivalent relationship with it. I'm proud to be from there, but at the same time too, I'm like, I kind of like, I don't hate it by any means, but there's just kind of a part of me that's rejects it in a way too. So it's weird. I don't know.
Yeah, I can kind of relate. So you're doing your PhD, and this is like 2 years later, you said.
Yep.
How does Mark?
So 2014.
Like, were you and Mark still in contact during that time?
No.
Loosely, not at all.
Nope.
Okay.
Not at all. I followed him. Kept following him. He had switched over to his new brand, which was his personal brand, markmanson.net. And he'd done all that in those 2 years. And I was in my PhD program. I was taking this class that was really, really hard. And it was called medical neuroscience. You took it with med students and everything like that. And I'd sat down for a study session with a group of students, and we were waiting on a few people. So I just decided I'm going to pop open my laptop and see what Mark's been up to, because I hadn't checked in for a little while. And right there, big letters, "I'm hiring." And my heart just jumps right up into my throat. I'm like, oh, he's hiring again. What? And I read the description, and it's like, I need somebody who can research. I need somebody who can write. I need somebody who is a self-starter, and everything. I'm just like, oh, this is too good to be true.
Wow.
It can't be, at that point. And so, yeah, it was in, I think it was April or May of 2014. And so we're coming up on finals, and I'm studying for this medical neuroscience test that's coming on, I think that week it was coming up, or the next week, whatever it was. And I kind of just dropped everything, applied for it. Mark has three rounds of a three-phase process of hiring. We can get into that a little bit more too. But I apply for it, and actually, kind of a funny side story was I applied for it thinking, at least get an interview. He's got to remember me from before, And he's like, I'll let everybody know by Sunday, and I don't hear anything by Sunday. And Sunday comes and goes, and I'm like, well, I guess. Shit. And he had 700 people apply for this job. So I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. Then Tuesday rolls around, and I get an email from him, and he's like, okay, phase 2 assignments. I'm like, what the hell? Email him, and right away he emails me back. He's like, oh shit, I'm so sorry. I just didn't get your name on the email list to tell you that you made it to phase 2. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So yeah, it's Tuesday by that point. I got that medical neuroscience final on Friday, but he's got his phase 2 is intense. It's you're doing research assignments. You're coming up with original content.
Do you remember exactly what the assignment was?
Yeah. Well, one of them I remember. Let's see. I still have it somewhere. It was a pretty hardcore neuroscience research summary that he wanted, because he was hiring somebody to do research for him and summarize it for him in a way that he could understand and stuff like that.
And why
it was a pretty hardcore.
Sorry, why was he making that shift? Why was he hiring someone like that?
Yeah, so he had expanded his brand. What he was doing at the time, he was going from that postmasculine.com at the time from men's advice and men's development to a broader brand. And he wanted broader appeal and wanted some credibility behind it. So he's always been really into like, he doesn't have a background in science, but he's always been really into like psychology studies, experimental psychology and neuroscience and stuff like that. He doesn't have any formal training in it. So he's like, I need to bring somebody on that does have that to kind of complement his skills here, right? So that was one thing I learned from him. He hires people who are better than him at a given task that he needs done or a given area that he needs help with.
Very smart.
So, he needed somebody who was like, he said it in the job description. I need someone who could just research me under the table. And I mean, I'm sitting here reading like the most esoteric papers in neuroscience and psychology and, that you could imagine. And I've gotten to the point where it doesn't even faze me, so that was a big leg up that I had at that time. So yeah, and he put that into his application process, right?
Yeah.
So he's like, your resume looks good, but can you walk the walk, right? So yeah, it's Tuesday that week, and I got that test on Friday, and he's like, okay, assignments are due on Sunday. I could have punted and just waited till the weekend to work on all of it, but I was like, no, you know what? I'm handing this into him by Friday. Like latest, I'm handing it to him Friday. I think I got it to him Thursday night. I went and took my test on Friday. Absolutely failed it. Just bombed that test. Bombed it. Really, really bad. But I thought, I was like, I can retake this class. I can take the ass chewing that I'm going to get for failing this class. I can't retake this application though. So I was staying up till 3 or 4 in the morning, for 3-4 nights in a row, whatever that was, 3 nights in a row, trying to get that done and going over it and over it and over it and just making it the best I could. And got to his round 3 or his phase 3 part, which was the interview. And a week later, I think he had offered me the job, and I was in the library again studying and made a big scene, and they almost kicked me out. And, that was it.
Wow. Out of, you said 700 applications. That's crazy.
Yeah. It was like 680 something or something like that. Yeah. It was.
What do you think, made you stand out? I mean, obviously, one, you had all the skills needed, right? Like you were pretty much the perfect profile. It seems like you put in like an obnoxious amount of effort into the application, right? Anything besides those things that like you think stood out for him? And
well, all of those things, that wasn't unique to me. I'm sure about 20 people I think made it to the phase 2 assignments, and I'm sure most, if not all of them, were insanely qualified, put an insane amount of work into it. And, all of that. I don't know, I guess I've talked a little bit with Mark about this every now and then, but we've hired people since then, and I've been in on the process too. So I now have that other side of the perspective too. But I think he just knew that I think you could just tell I had drank the Kool-Aid by that point, right? Like he just knew, not only had I applied before and like, really was chomping at the bit and trying to get a job that I wasn't qualified for, but now I'm qualified for this job and I'm back again, and I reminded him in my email. I was like, hey, 2 years ago, you said if I ever wanted to apply again, and just reminded him of that. And he was like, oh, this guy's back again,
It's that persistence.
So there was some persistence to it. There was, but like I was saying, we recently hired over the last year and a half, actually, we've hired a few people, and I've been in on some of that process. And, Mark's like, I'm not trying to be vain here, but like, I need to know these people that they've drank the Kool-Aid, right? Like I need somebody who's all in. And it's, you just know right away when you talk to these people, whether they are or not. So yeah, I think you could definitely sense that.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And yeah, it makes sense because ultimately if they're really into your content, they're going to enjoy the job more, right? So that makes a lot of sense.
No, exactly. And they're going to show up, and it just makes working with those people much easier and more enjoyable. And you don't have to explain the brand to people, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to explain what you're going for, because they just know, they can feel it, right? And that was a big thing too. It was like with Mark, again, going all the way back to his dating advice days and stuff like that. I just knew his brand. I just knew who he was because of what he put out, and I didn't have to think about, oh, what is the Mark Manson brand? What is this like? No, I was already a part of it. Right?
Yeah.
So, no.
And so when you started with him, how big was his team? Like, did he still have those people that he hired back in the days, or?
He had one guy who's still with us today. He's been on longer than I have. Mm-hmm. Philip Kemper, he's our IT kind of guy, I guess IT guy, tech guy, developer. He's a self-taught developer too. And that was the thing. He got hired by Mark during those internships, and Mark hired him because Philip had zero coding experience. But then in the application process, he taught himself how to code. Mm-hmm. During the application process, wild. He taught himself how to code. He taught himself like JavaScript or something like that.
Jesus.
And now he's like, he manages, our whole like everything tech related. He does, anything that requires some code. He's helped, we developed an app. He kind of headed up the development of the app. We hired out other people to help with that, but he ran all that. But he's just one of those people who's just like, he figures it out.
Yeah.
That's another thing. That's another thing too, I know Mark looks for, and I'm sure anybody in this industry who's looking to hire people looks for is, do you show the initiative to figure things out, right?
Yeah.
Like, because there's so much stuff we do that's just, there's no playbook for it. There's no, we're trying new things all the time that not either nobody or very few people have done before. And so can you figure it out? And do you have the initiative to figure it out on your own too? Do you not have to be told to go figure it out? You just go figure it out. So, and that's what I've done kind of like, that was just all of my life. I've always kind of done that. I'm somebody who's into lots of different things. And so that means I have to figure out a lot of things on my own. And so I think that came through too. Yeah.
Nice. When you started with him, what? Mm-hmm. So you were he hired you to do research for him, right?
That's right.
But at the time, I don't think he was writing books. Right? I mean, he had written the book, the ebook Models, right. But this was before The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And so you were doing research for his blogs, for his blog posts.
Yeah. Mostly blog posts, yeah. So we were, adding in more kind of experimental research like the citations and stuff you see on the site. That was kind of when I started. We started adding those. I would do summaries, of whatever was a research topic. Maybe it was on, personality, or it was on, anything. We did anxiety, or anything we would write about. And on top of that, I started running the social media too.
Okay.
And I was managing his email. So we can get into that because I've seen a lot of reader email and a lot of people like trying to be mentored by him. I've seen a lot of that, so we can get into that at some point. So flag that, yeah. But I was working with him pretty close at that time. We were working kind of daily on stuff. Still building the blog, building the following, building the social media channels, because he really, he cut his teeth for social media anyway on Facebook, back when Facebook didn't suck, right? Like it was the golden years, like 2012 to 2016 or 2015 maybe, were, that's when we really scaled up.
So you had that TikTok reach.
Yeah. Yeah, no, at that time because he was working on the subtle art, or kind of early drafts of it anyway. He had ideas about what he wanted to write. He wasn't sure if he wanted to self-publish or go to a big publisher or anything like that. He was making all those decisions still. He sent me an early draft of a book. I don't even know if I could call it an early draft of the subtle art, but it was a draft of a book anyway. And this wasn't very long after I started working with him, and it was just all over the place. And it was, he was trying to get like super into the research in some areas and then back up and do this big thing. And I was just like, I'm not sure. I'm like, oh boy, I don't know if I should have left academia at this point. Right? there were times like that. But he then, the blog kept picking up, social media following kept growing. And then one day he messages me and he's like, can you read this and tell me? He's like, I can't tell if it's complete shit or brilliant. And it was the blog post, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And I read it and I'm rolling on the floor, laughing the whole time, going back and forth from that to being like, holy shit, this is like also profound at the same time, but it's curse words everywhere and I love it, and I go back to him and I said, Mark, if you don't publish this, I'm going to, and I'm not going to care if you fire me because it has to be out there. And he was like, all right, let's do it. And then, I went and I put it all up, got it all formatted, found the images for it. And I'm just like, oh, this is going to be good. And it was like a viral hit right away. Back in the Facebook days, again, this was, 2014, 2015, I think. It was early 2015 when he posted that, I think. And it went nuts.
When you say it went viral, what did that mean at the time with with a blog post?
At the time, I think we had within a week or two, it had like something like I can't remember exactly. I want to say over 500,000 views, within a week or two, which at that time, for us was really, that's a lot. That would be a lot for us today, even too, I think. But it hit and it went crazy, We'd had a little bit of traction before that, I think too. Was that before or after? I can't remember, but he published a post on the life purpose post that he has. That's actually very popular as well. And Elizabeth Gilbert had actually shared it too. So that really helped with social media following and stuff like that. I think that was before Subtle Art anyway. So yeah.
And when you guys published that, because you were like, you have to publish this or I'm going to publish it. Like, did you have any inkling that this might be like good enough to turn into a book as far as like the concept?
I think Mark did. At the time I was just like, this is a kick-ass blog post, man. Like, this is awesome. I think that's the other thing about working with Mark is he really does have vision like that where, he wasn't sure if it was good or not. And so like, I guess I pride myself maybe a little too much on being like, no, this is good. This is definitely good. I have, so I pride myself probably a little too much on having the taste to tell him to do it. But he had the vision, I think, to say that, the message just in this blog post is bigger than what's in this blog post. And part of it was just smart marketing too. Like when he did finally go shopping books around to publishers, he knew that he was the not giving a fuck guy. By that point, I think he knew that. And
just because his audience made him that guy, right? Like from what the fact that they resonate with it?
Yeah. Or? Yeah, I think so. I mean, he'd always been a little bit crass. He'd always been a little bit indignant. He'd always been a little bit kind of pushing the boundaries of what was acceptable in the industry, So that, I think that crystallized it for him a little bit more though, for sure. And I think the publishers wanted to know that he was on board with that was what he was going to push. And so he pitched the book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, to him. He had a few different ideas, I think, for it, but he pitched that idea and, they said, yeah, let's write it. The editor at HarperCollins was just gung ho about it. He was like, I don't care. He's like, I'm going to find every last dollar we can, to make sure we win this, book, to make sure we get this from you.
Dude, that must have been so exciting. Like when that decision got made, because that affects your job as well, right? And like just you enter like a whole new realm of possibilities.
Definitely. It was huge for us. It was really big. Not only like was there like a publisher that was excited about it, but they were they were going to pay him a big advance. What I thought was a big advance for somebody who had not, published formally or published in he was self-published before. But looking back now, they were, the whole blogging industry, the whole online publishing industry has actually been a big benefit for the traditional publishing industry, because now they can weed out, people who, if you don't have an audience online, they're probably not going to look too hard at you anyway.
It's like the validation step. Like if you can't build an audience, like your stuff's not interesting enough. Yeah.
Their cost for validating is close to zero now because they know you have a captive audience. And so, so all of those fears, and it was back in like the early 2010s, where people were like, oh, traditional publishing is going away. No, it got better. It got better for them anyway. And they were able to leverage all those audiences that these people who probably wouldn't have been given a second look. Now they were like, oh no, we need to pay attention to this. And so the smart publishers paid attention and they made a lot of money. So yeah, definitely.
And so how did your job responsibilities change as a result?
Yeah. So over time, we go through, I think it was probably it might've been another year or so, maybe a little over a year that Mark, that book finally got out and published. Mark wrote the book. I ended up, so I was living in, let's see, where was I? I was in Colorado, I think at the time. And then I picked up and started vagabonding around a little bit.
So you guys were working remote, the team?
It's 100% remote. A little side story about that too. I actually the first and only time in 7 years that I've physically met Mark Manson was at his wedding in Brazil.
You're kidding.
No, he invited me. He was going to have a small wedding down there and, we're on our Slack channel or whatever. And he's like, yeah, you guys are invited here. It's in November. Come on down, And I'm like, yeah, sure. Screw it. Why not?
That is crazy, man. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
It's like
first time I physically met him, I'm walking down the streets of Sao Paulo. I had just gotten in and I'm all tired, and I think we're at hotels that were close to each other or something like that. And I'm just walking down the street and I see this tall white guy and I'm like, oh, hey, Mark, what's up?
It's funny because I started working with, I don't know if you know Noah Kagan.
Yeah, I know Noah. Sure. Know who he is. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So during the summer of last year, I started working with him. And we're remote as well. And so there's him and his colleague Mitchell that I work with as well. I've actually met him because he visited LA where I was living at the time. So we met up. But my colleague Mitchell, who's in Austin, I've never seen, but we talk 2-3 times a week. We're on meetings and I feel like he's a really, really good friend, but I've never actually physically met him. And it's such a weird era we live in now, it's I'm actually I'm gonna be in Austin in 2-3 months and we're gonna meet in person. It's you meet in person, it's a little different as well, right? Because the same thing happened with Noah, where it's you meet in person, it's oh, this is it's a little different on Skype, or on Zoom and stuff. Yeah. And it's just very, very interesting times.
It's really, it's strange. And now, we have people on our team, a few people on our team too. They've never met Mark. That I don't think so anyway. One's in Australia. She runs the social media now. Thank God I don't run the social media anymore. That ruined me for social media, just running that. And we have another woman. She lives in Bangkok. She's Thai, actually. She lives in Bangkok, Philip, he lives in, he's Dutch. He's from Amsterdam. I think he's in Cyprus or something right now. I don't know. But yeah, it's always been a fully remote team. Mark is very hands off. So that was another thing. I think he definitely looks for people who he doesn't like to manage people. Yeah. So he's just you need to be able to do this on your own. We're all adults here, right? You need to be able to do this on your own.
That seems like he front loads all the work in the recruiting process to hire the best freaking people possible. And then he just lets them run.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think he's been very good about that kind of both in the big picture and day-to-day stuff of front loading work, finding, okay, he's going to put a whole bunch of energy into this one thing for right now and then, pass it off and let somebody else go wild with it. And so he's been really good about that. Yeah. Yeah.
So sorry.
Which has been fun. So he'll send us new stuff all the time. So yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I cut you off before. You were talking about vagabonding.
Oh yeah. So Mark was writing the subtle art and I was, I was down in Guatemala and he was sending me drafts of chapters, of the subtle art. I'm down in Guatemala. I'm, sitting at a bar in Guatemala, looking at early drafts of the subtle art and not giving a fuck and not knowing that, what was going to happen or anything. But,
were you, how involved were you with the research? Because, like, when I reached out to you, you kind of like, at first I was like, you kind of remind me of like a Ryan Holiday, who like worked under like Robert Greene and stuff. But it seems like it's more of the research, like scientific research aspect than like the stories and that stories aspect. So I'm curious, like how involved you were with writing that book.
There's, I do research like some background stories and stuff like that. Mark does a lot of that himself, though. I think he's more into that, and he leaves the scientific kind of research to us. There was, I think, all the stories in the subtle art, I think, pretty much kind of come from him. There's a story in his most recent book, Everything is Fucked, about. I think it's the story about Elliot. There was some research from this researcher, Antonio Damasio, who was a pretty well-known neuroscientist who had this kind of famous patient, Elliot. And I was like, oh, Mark, you should totally look into this. This is awesome. And kind of came up with that for him and stuff like that. For the subtle art, though, he was basically sending me chapters that he thought, he'd outlined everything. He'd been over them a few times himself and wanted some feedback on them. And at that point, I was helping him a lot with kind of like the final organization of individual chapters and sections, just some general edits and stuff like that too, kind of bigger edits, but not like, okay, we need to completely axe this chapter or something like that. When Everything is Fucked was coming along, he was kind of a little more pressed for time in that because they had a harder deadline. And I fought pretty hard on one chapter in that, and we did end up changing that quite a bit. So he does listen to feedback from his team. He does listen to what we have to say, because I think he knows, for one, like, again, we've drank the Kool-Aid. We're his audience, So he does listen to us, and we do have sway in his mind, I think. And so that's kind of cool to be a part of that too. Yeah.
What about did you do a lot of the researching as far as like scientific studies and stuff, and like footnotes for the first and second book?
No. So he didn't really footnote the first book that much. He would include studies and stuff like that. I'm not sure if there's any footnotes in the first book, honestly. The second book, he really wanted to make sure he was citing things, because he was making some pretty big arguments in that and kind of pretty big claims about, meaning, finding meaning in the world, and kind of like the psychological mechanisms behind finding meaning in the world and stuff like that. He did a lot of that by himself. He's gotten more as times went on. Anyway, he's kind of shifted after the subtle art. Yeah, let's back up here. After the subtle art kind of took off, and I think he hit that like 1 million sales mark within like 3 or 4 months. It was pretty quick. So it was the beginning of 2017. He made a decision. Philip and I were the only ones working for him full time anyway at the time. And he kind of made a decision. He said, look, I'm going to hand over a lot of the website duties to you guys. I'm going to let you run that. I'm going to sit back and I'm going to do what I want to do, which is right. And you guys take over, And so my role has evolved. I still do some research here and there. My role has evolved, though, more to running the content on the site more than anything, and running, helping with the marketing there and the email and like all of that kind of stuff. He's taken more of a focus on writing books and just writing, because that's what he wants to do. He doesn't want to have to deal with all the other stuff if he doesn't have to as much. I mean, he still does. He's obviously very involved in it, but he hands it over to us more readily now.
Very cool. And then were you involved with the book marketing at all?
Yeah, definitely. Especially both books, actually. That was, one thing we did learn early on was that the publishers are really good, about getting the book produced, both the content and just the physical production of it. They're good about the distribution and stuff like that. Their marketing leaves something to be desired, definitely. And so we were like, okay, we're on our own here. We gotta make sure we're leveraging our audience. The publisher would come to us and be like, oh, can you do a social media post on this? And I'm like, well, yeah, we've already done 10 of these, but yeah, sure, we'll do another one for you. Like I shouldn't badmouth the publisher, but because they've actually been really great.
Yeah. It's just not their forte.
it's just not their forte. Yeah. Which in a way is kind of weird. But anyway, we were doing, Mark actually for the first book for the subtle art, I think he did pre-sales, and I think it was like anyone who bought a certain number of books or something like that, he would write a haiku for them.
Oh, wow.
So he wrote like, I don't know, it was more than 100 haikus because I had to make all the files for each one. Like we sent them this like really kind of cool PDF that had a cool design on it and stuff like that. It's like, you can print this out and type it up as a haiku written specifically for one person. And some of them were really funny. And we sent that to people who pre-ordered the book. I think it was like you had to order like 5 copies or something like that. I don't remember exactly.
Wow, that's a pretty good deal.
Yeah. So we were doing stuff like that. Obviously social media. I was running social media at the time, so we were. I was working on that. A lot of email marketing with that too. But yeah, we were just trying to hit everything that we could with the resources we had at the time. And
so the main channels were the blog you guys had, the social media channels, the email list. Anything I'm missing?
No, that was pretty much it. We weren't, at that time we weren't really focused on SEO all that much or anything like that. Like it was pretty much just social media, getting people to sign up for the list and then kind of hitting the list. So yeah, that was it. It wasn't complicated, It wasn't anything too fancy. It was just consistency. Yeah.
And so what did you guys do to grow the list? What were the strategies? And also I'd be curious to hear more details on like the numbers of like how much you helped grow that list.
Sure. So we still, and pretty much always have, I guess, to grow the list, we've always done just PDF downloads. And there's, I of course I keep up on like email marketing trends and stuff like that. And there's this whole group of people who are like, oh, PDFs are dead and this and that. And it's like, well, your PDFs are dead because they suck.
Yeah.
Like you guys can't write for shit. And it's about information nobody wants to give you their email address for. Like, so we've grown a huge list. I'm actually not sure if I can give out numbers on that, so I won't give you exact numbers. But I've probably, since I've joined, at one point we probably 6 or 7x'd the list.
Wow.
And we've cleaned it a little up since then. We weren't really paying attention to like list health or anything for a long time either. We were just growing the list, and we've cleaned it up a lot. And so it's probably down a little bit just from removing people and stuff like that over the years. But it's our open rates. I'm just going to tell you, our open rates are insane. Like people with we use Active Campaign, and people at Active Campaign are like, what the hell are you guys doing? And it's not like he's writing like super catchy clickbaity titles or anything, or subject lines or anything like that. It's just people just have come to know Mark as giving them interesting information in kind of like funny and entertaining ways.
Yeah.
And so we've trained them well, I guess, to just the open rates are really, really.
If the emails are
really
good
high.
over and over and over, like people are gonna like look forward to them. So it makes sense. Can you share that, or is that also no worries?
I'll share it. We probably average around a 50% open rate, if not
That's
more
really
sometimes. Good. Yeah. Click-through rates are pretty high too. I don't know exactly what those are off the top of my head, but I know they're way above industry average too.
I was just gonna say, as far as so when you say PDFs, that's just from the traffic you guys are getting on the website, and then you have PDFs on there, or do you advertise them outside of the website as well, like on forums or other places?
We promote them like on social media every now and then, like, hey, get this guide or whatever it is. But mostly just from people coming to the site, and then we have an opt-in CTA. I think we put in a pop-up. I think last year we resisted pop-ups for a very, very long time, but I think we've seen that the industry has matured to the point where people kind of like, okay, a pop-up isn't quite as annoying as it used to be. People kind of expect them now. So we have those, scattered throughout the articles and, in the footers and stuff like that. And that's really all it was, though. It was just, the plan was just always write the best that we could, provide people with a good experience, and the rest kind of takes care of itself. I know that sounds maybe too simplistic, and maybe it is. I don't know, but it seemed to have worked. And so with the email list now too. Well, that's the other thing. So Mark, for about a year and a half now, has been doing a weekly email. It's called Mindfuck Mondays. I saw that. He's really into the cursing. Yeah, really into the cursing.
It's the brand.
Yeah, it is. It's the brand. And he has not missed a week in over a year and a half. And so that's another, now it's just like, now just sign up for this newsletter, right? And again, I think there was people, a year and a half, 2 years ago, people were saying, oh, email's dead, or there's people probably who say that, which again is just insane to me. Emailers are our best channel, our most profitable channel. It's our most engaged channel.
Yeah.
And newsletters, that was the other thing. People were saying, no, newsletters are dead. Well, your newsletter's dead because it sucks. Yeah. Provide people with something of immense value, and your newsletter will thrive, and it's been one of the best things he's done I think in the last couple of years is do that.
Yeah.
That newsletter.
Plus, I mean, if you own your audience like that, it's just, it's like if you have the option between having 1 million Instagram followers and 1 million email subscribers, I mean, there's no question, you should 100% pick the email. I mean, it's like, I mean, you're saying you get 50% versus like the reach on Instagram, let's say, is like, I mean, it's gonna it never goes above 10%, like 10%. Yeah. So, so as far as market, I mean, you guys keep it simple, but it's crazy because why do you think the subtle art of not giving a fuck did so well? Do you think, obviously it starts from I mean, Mark has a really engaged, loyal following, right? But beyond that, why do you think it? Because I mean, it blew up, right? I don't know the exact numbers. Maybe you can share those. But what's crazy to me is when I go to the airport now, it's still, or when I go to a bookstore, it's still the book that is always showing at the top of the shelf. That orange book with the not giving a fuck on it. It's just stands out so well. It's it's crazy. It's a huge bestseller. So why do you think that is?
Well, quick side story first. One time I was in an airport and I saw it, so I went over and I grabbed it and was about to take a picture of it. And somebody next to me goes, "It's kind of a stupid title, don't you think?" And I was like, "Yeah." I didn't say anything. I was like, "Yeah." But no, I mean, you're right. Yes, he had an audience, but the thing is about that book, that book. People would read that book, they didn't even know who Mark was, actually.
Yeah.
So it was something besides just his audience that sparked interest in the book. And it was probably a little bit of the crass title, the big flashy orange cover, there's that. But I can share sales numbers with that because we share them on the site. The last I checked anyway, I'm pretty sure the subtle art was either close to or over 12 million copies sold,
incredible.
Which is insane. Insane. Everything is fucked. I think it's hit between 2 and 3 million at this point, if not more. And then models, I think that's probably closing in on, I don't know what models is, so I won't even say, but it's still selling. It's still one of the best sellers in that niche
really?
Anyway. So
very cool.
Yeah. But I think what appeals to people in that book was just that it's just different enough from what everyone else was saying, and just crass enough and just no bullshit enough that it was just refreshing to people. They're like, oh, okay, I shouldn't have to just feel good all the time. It's okay to feel like a piece of crap sometimes. It's okay to be a horrible person sometimes, as long as we're aware of that and make sure we're not being a horrible person if we don't have to be. And it's something beyond just the feel good, fluffy, just think positive, just manifest your, your destiny or whatever it is. There's something beyond it, and something just that cuts through all of that and just kind of like speaks to you. And that's what people say. They're like, oh, it's like you were talking directly to me, or like I've had this exact problem, and it was like you were talking to me, and he just cuts through that. And he does it in a way that's fun,
Yeah.
And so say what you will about the entertainment value of it, but it brings people in, and I think I hope at least has made people better too. So yeah,
100%. No, he has a unique voice, and it was probably uniquely positioned as well, and like really good timing.
Yeah, definitely.
So after that, he's like, I'll let you guys run the website. So what did that look like for you? You probably got way more into SEO and then growing the email list. Anything else that you started taking on?
I mean, those were the big things. He kind of had me focusing on SEO.
Yeah.
So I kind of had to go again. One of those things is like, okay, go figure this out, right? We kind of had it in mind. It was like, oh yeah, write a good title and make sure this is in the right spot or something like that. But really started to buckle down on that. I took Tommy Griffiths from ClickMinded. He's got a really like fantastic SEO course that he teaches. I took that, and I've emailed a lot with Tommy. He's a really good guy. And so that was kind of my new kind of big project that I was working on. Philip then took over like optimization for like click-throughs and sales and stuff like that.
Okay.
And so he kind of, while we were all kind of working on that anyway, he's like, okay, this is going to be our focus now, and handed those over more to us. He was, of course, still writing for the blog, still directing a lot of that, still making decisions, but, gave us kind of the reins with a lot of that. Well, so he could go write and do whatever he wanted and kind of chill for a little bit, because he had worked so hard, up to the subtle art that he thought he needed it.
Yeah. And this kind of comes back to something we were talking about before, but it's interesting. I think Noah has a very similar philosophy than Mark, where it's like kind of like automating the things you're not a fan of doing, or you're not the best person at doing, so you can focus on like really what you love doing, and it's
Definitely.
really cool to see how, I mean, it seems like he's built a team to support basically his love for writing, and only being able to focus on that while still having like a stable business that funds, in a sense, his love, and plus, I mean, keeps growing, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. And the interesting part about that too, the people that he does bring on, that we recognized early on and we kind of joked about too, was that, Mark is he's a very, just get it 80% of the way there and ship it, right? Like he's that kind of mind. And then like Philip and I are definitely like, no, this needs to be perfect before we need to get it out, right? And so we balance each other out in that way. He says too, and maybe this is going a little bit too far, but he says his wife is like that too, where she's the one who's always like, we need to be there on time. We need to like, she's like, I need everything organized and stuff like that. And he's kind of like, I'm a little more laid back. So whether he knew it or not, he was bringing people into his life that helped him do that. So yeah, I think that's another thing people should look for, is that like, what's a skill that you have that could complement some deficit, or not necessarily deficit of theirs, but just an area that they could use somebody with.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You mentioned before that you manage the email, like as far as, I mean, I guess his inbox, right? I'm guessing it's from the newsletter, and that you get a lot of emails from like readers. Any tips
Definitely.
on approaches? Like, let's say there's no position right now that's open to work with Mark, but let's say someone wanted to work with him or wanted some advice or some sort of mentorship. Like how do you recommend they approach it, given what you know about like how people have reached out in the past?
Right. So yeah, I mean, Mark is very active on email. So I was like managing his email, but a lot of it was just kind of sifting through it for him, but he does respond to people personally. He takes his time to really connect with his readers and everything like that. it might go through a stage of filtering, like through us and stuff like that. I don't manage his email anymore, but I used to. And I would just say, well, I've heard it on a couple of the episodes I've listened to of your podcast here already. Just like, if you do want to work with someone, I know we're not hiring right now, but we do hire contractors every now and then. You know, we do freelancers and stuff like that. So if that's kind of the position you're in, provide value up front. I've heard it a million times in a million other places on this podcast too. You're going to provide the value up front, free of charge, no strings attached, and it's going to be as frictionless as possible. The things that have gotten through, like especially when I was sorting through things for him and stuff like that, someone would have just something awesome being like, hey, you're doing this, but what if you did this? And here's how I would do it. Exactly. Push this button and this is how it works. And it was just there. It was, you know, show me the value. Don't tell me about it.
Solve my problems.
Don't tell me how awesome
right?
you are. Yes, solve my problems for me. Solve the problems I don't know I have, even if that's what you're saying, right? Like sometimes that's the case. And so, you know, at this point, anybody listening to this probably has heard that before, but there's further validation for you, I guess. Like that's really what it comes down to. And Mark, in his job post that he's posted before, in conversations I've had with him, whatever, he's always said, you know, I'm not saying this to be vain. I'm not saying this to be an asshole, but how are you going to make my life better?
Yeah.
He's like, because I got a million things going on. How are you going to make my life better? That's all I want to know.
Yeah. I mean,
and
yeah. At the end of the day, he's a busy guy, and he can't just answer 1,000 people's requests, right?
Right. And I mean, to anybody out there reaching out to anyone, don't think that just because there's not a huge, maybe not a huge chance that you're going to get a response or something like that it's not worth it to send that email, because we read every single email that comes through. Yeah. And whether we respond to it or not, it's a data point that we do take into account. And Mark takes that into account. The whole structure takes that into account. So it's not like it's all for naught, right? There's definitely value in just reaching out. And a lot of times too, what Mark finds anyway, you know, because we're dealing with like self-development stuff. So a lot of times what Mark finds anyway is that people will write a problem to him, and then by the end of the email, you see, you know what? After just writing this out, I think I know what to do.
So cool.
So yeah. So there's value in that too. But it's definitely worth reach out to these people, because especially now more than ever, if they're smart, they will read every email they get. They will try to respond to people that you know, deserve a response.
I think I think people underestimate like how easy it is to actually get in touch with pretty much anyone you look up to or whose content you consume. Yeah. I think the key part to underscore is like in the approach of like how you like are you able like given that the person you want to work for or whose advice you want is probably going to see your email, then it's like, how do you stand out and like deserve an answer when like they're getting 1,000 emails like a week, you know, like how do you stand out of those thousands? Like how can you put something out there that's like so radically like value packed or so value like creative or different, original, that like it makes the person want to respond, right?
Yep. Yeah. And that's exactly what it comes down to at that point. So.
Do you have any cool examples of people that have reached out creatively in that way? Or
I was trying to think. I remember one in particular. Well, okay, I'll maybe I can come up with two. I remember one in particular. A guy emailed us about I think it was like what was it for? It was like a trailer for a book, like a YouTube trailer. And we weren't on, at that time, we had no YouTube presence whatsoever, really. And he's like, here, I made a trailer for your book. And it was just awesomely done. It was just, and because I read the email and I'm like, what the hell is a book trailer? Right? Like I'm in the publishing industry. I don't even know what a book trailer is. And it was kind of a thing back in that day anyway, back in like, you know, 2014, 2015, whatever it was. And I was like, this is really cool. And it was really well done. It was hyper personalized. You know, it was basically a video that kind of hit the highlights of the book and all the interesting little ways, and had really cool visual effects with it. I don't remember exactly what it was like, but that was one that stood out to me at the time that got through. And Mark, I don't remember if we actually ended up making it, but I know we had a conversation with that person. Another one was an artist. She emailed just a picture. It was after kind of the subtle art, the book had taken off and stuff like that. She emailed a picture that she had drawn of Disappointment Panda, which is like a character that Mark made up for. Yeah. And it was just a really well done, and it was like so on brand too. Like the style, it was just I think it was either pen or pencil drawing, so black and white. And just the style was so on brand. It was a little bit, it wasn't super clean. It was a little bit, kind of edgy and kind of, I don't know, grungy, almost. And, Disappointment Panda had this little shirt on and a margarita, and it was just so on brand and so perfect that I was like, oh, this is great. And years had went by, and I think a year or two ago, we reached back out to her and commissioned her to work, commissioned just from that one picture she sent a few years back. And I think we just replied, hey, this is awesome. We'll share it on social media or something like that. And I think we did. And then a couple of years later, we were like, oh, remember that one girl, that one woman that sent us that picture? And now we need some artwork. Let's reach out to her. And so she did a series for us that we haven't used yet, but we paid her for it. So yeah.
That's so cool.
There's the two I can think of off the top of my head that were really good anyway.
And it also points something out that like there's kind of like an opportunity. Like I always see like there's like an opportunity gap, where it's like you were talking about how, initially you applied when he was doing like the mail advice website and he was looking for someone a little more technical to manage the website. You didn't have those skills at the time, but like you put yourself out there and later, like when he was looking for like the person that you were the perfect fit for that position, only 2 years later did it work out, right? But like you're planting those seeds. And it seems like these people that have applied are doing the same, where it's like she might have just sent a picture, right? Or like an image or drawing or something like that. She probably did that with like a dozen other creators as well, right? And like eventually at some point, like when she first reached out, like you guys didn't need anyone, but like at some point you're like, oh, like you're looking for that exact person, and it's like you already have the perfect fit, and so you reached out, right? So I think that's something important to underscore.
Yeah. Even though they're busy people, they don't forget that. They don't forget something that if you even stood out in a small way at one point, they won't forget that. Definitely.
Oh. Nice. I have one or two more questions.
Sure.
I was wondering, so since, you're working for, like, we started the interview, I was talking about, like, how, one of the cool things I find of, like, going to work with these people whose content you consume, right, is, like, a lot of times they're kind of, like, living a lifestyle that you kind of look up to, right? So I was curious if that's the case for you, and if like you aspire to be a writer yourself, or if that's not the case.
I think so. When I first got on with Mark, I think it was kind of more that case. I felt like when I got on with him, he was still pretty early in his career, although he built a pretty solid following by that point and was definitely growing. I felt like I was like, oh, okay, Mark and I kind of have similar views about things and similar values, and I think we do in a lot of ways still. I love to write. I've always been a good writer. Even like I remember getting praise when I was like in kindergarten for a story I wrote about like mold, in my yard. That's always kind of come naturally to me, and I enjoyed it. When I was doing scientific research and stuff like that. The vast majority of people who do research, like, they hate writing, or it's definitely not at the top of their list anyway. But I was like, oh, let's write this. This is gonna be great. We're gonna write a paper, and it's the most boring paper you've probably ever read. But I was like, let's write an awesome boring paper, right? And so I really enjoyed that, and I always kind of knew anyway that I was like, well, whatever I do is probably going to involve some writing, right? One thing I've noticed recently, though, is that I don't see writing the way that I think other writers or people who just kind of like know it in their bones that they're writers. I see it as more kind of like, oh, it's a tool that I can use for lots of other things. It can be applied to so many different areas, that, you can be a copywriter, you can be a fiction writer, you can be, anything. You can use it for anything. You can have a plumbing business and you could write about plumbing. You know what I mean? It's like you being a writer is not dependent on you just being a writer, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
right? And so that's kind of one thing I've noticed is that I never had that burning desire to just sit down and write and write and write. I love to write. I enjoy writing. I enjoy thinking about complex ideas and try to synthesize them down into, digestible formats for people. But I just I don't think I have that where it's like I wake up in the morning and I'm like, what am I going to write today? I never quite had that, and I think for a long time I tried to force that a little bit.
Okay.
And actually, when I applied to work with Mark, I actually had my own kind of like little writing website that I had too. That's maybe another thing, people, I've noticed through the other interviews you've done too, everybody has their side projects going on. And if you're a person who has like a million side projects going on, you're probably good for this industry. But no, I think I love using writing as a tool. I don't necessarily think that I want to be a great writer or anything like that, or I want to be known just for my writing. And that's definitely not it. One person that kind of helped me actually figure that out. This kid, his name's Cole Schaefer. He runs Honey Copy. Are you familiar with him?
Never heard of him. No. I'm writing it down.
Well, you will. You definitely will. He's a pretty young guy. He runs Honey Copy. It's a copywriting website. And I think he was just on, I don't know if it's aired yet or not, but he was just on Marie Forleo.
Okay.
But I reached out to him actually a year and a half or so ago. And I was just like, hey, man, you got some amazing stuff. You're an amazing writer. I work with Mark Manson. I'm just telling you, you're awesome. And I've been following this kid, and he's just, he lives, eats, and breathes writing. Really? He's a copywriter, but he also has like poetry books. And, he's just super into that. And I'm just like, oh, man, this kid's got it. Like, how does he do it? And I'm like, it made me realize, I was like, he doesn't have to ask himself how he does it, right? Yeah. He just does it.
That's interesting.
And so,
and what, you said you had your own blog at the time. Like I think it's really important to like try different things and like see what really Definitely. Like brings you alive, right? So like what made you realize that it wasn't for you? Were you starting to dread it, like dread writing, or? Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't say dread it. I was just starting to, I didn't quite see the value in what I was creating. And then, so I thought, oh, well, then I just need to find some way to have this be valuable. And I just couldn't quite find it. I don't know if I was, because I wasn't, again, I do enjoy writing. I enjoy the process of it. It's not quite at that level where I'm like, oh, this is it. Right. Yeah. And so, I did that for a little while before Mark kind of handed things over to the website to us too. I was actually trying out some stuff. I actually built a little platform to teach analytics too, because I did the analytics for the website. Philip and I do the analytics for the website, but I was like, oh, I could teach people how to use their analytics to, grow a blog or grow a following and this and that. And that wasn't for me either. Again, I was using writing to try to, promote an idea, and I was just like, oh God, I really don't give a shit about Google Analytics. So, but you're right, I had to try that out. I'm definitely the kind of person who's like, I have to try that out and see if that's for me. Yeah. And that wasn't for me either.
Yeah. So, Speaking of side projects, I mean, you have worked on a lot of very cool side projects. One that stood out just from your website is this side project that it seems like it's basically like an online guide to microdosing and psychedelics.
Oh, yeah, the third wave.
The third wave, yeah. And I wanted to hear more about that from you and how that came about and what's your involvement with it, and yeah.
Oh, it's an interesting story. I met the founder of that, Paul Austin, way back in 2015, I want to say. Yeah, I think so. I think it was 2015, maybe early 2016. And I was still vagabonding through Latin America. I was in Mexico. I had I had found myself in this little coastal beach town on the west coast of Mexico called Zipolite. And it turns out it's a nudist beach town. It's a nudist beach town, and there's just like hippies tripping on mushrooms.
No way.
Like, I thought it was just like there was an area of the beach that was like nudist, and I show up and there's just people walking around naked all up and down the beach, and I'm like, oh, this is how it is. And you can just tell people are just tripping balls all the time, and I'm just like, all right, the internet sucks here. There's a bunch of kind of creepy naked people all the time around. I can't get any work done. It's hot as hell. There's no air conditioning. The iguana tacos were really good, but other than that, I was like, I need to get out of here. So I went to the city of Oaxaca, kind of, randomly. And I was telling Mark, this is like the middle of the week. I was like, Mark, I need to get the hell out of here. I need a day off because it's going to take me 8 hours on a bus to get to Oaxaca. And he's like, that's the weirdest excuse, the nudist beach, tripping balls, hippies excuse to get off work here. But I'll give it to you. So I wound up there, and he's like, I actually got a few friends in Oaxaca, and he didn't know Paul, but Paul was kind of on the fringes of this friend group that Mark kind of set me up with. And Paul, at the time, he was teaching English as a second language for people who were trying to get into like universities, like English-speaking universities. And so that's what he was doing for income. He had a little business going on, and he was just doing the digital nomad thing. But he had just started this little side project called The Third Wave. And he had the website, he had the design set up, stuff like that, but he didn't really have any content. And so what he wanted was like somebody who kind of knew like the science and neuroscience and stuff like that behind some of this stuff to write him some guides. And I was like, yo, dude, I'm right here. That's awesome. And he's like, the only thing is I don't really have any money right now. And I'm like, okay, well, we can work out a trade. He's like, I got a bunch of airline miles. And I'm like, perfect, man. Just pay me in airline miles. That's awesome. So he booked me a trip to Peru. I think it was I was going to be back in the States. So he booked me a ticket from Denver to Cusco and back. And I wrote him the initial guides that are now on his site, still on his site. They've grown a lot. I did some work for him this past year too, just a little SEO work for him and stuff like that. Trying to get him up to speed. He's grown out this team though. They get, I don't know, over 500,000 hits every month.
Wow.
And maybe more.
It seems, I mean, I checked that out, and it's like, it seems super extensive and like really, I mean, if you're getting into that stuff, like I feel like it seems, it looks super helpful. Yeah.
It's grown into a really big resource, like there's this older kind of resource, Erowid, that it talks a lot about the psychedelic stuff. That's kind of like a Wikipedia for that. There's Third Wave is kind of an updated version of that, and they focus more on microdosing for sure. And I mean, full disclosure, I really don't have much experience with psychedelics. Yeah. I actually got one experience with psychedelics. That was in I don't know if it's too much for or not, but this was in southern Mexico. Again, I did DMT. That's the only thing I've ever really messed with psychedelics with, and it that was its own experience that for another podcast. But I've been more just with Paul anyway. He and I became friends while we were in Oaxaca and hanging out, and just kind of helping him out when I can. And he's a good guy, and he's really grown that into like an amazing resource. He really has.
So cool, very cool that you're a part of that. Any other since we're on the topic of side projects, any other side projects that have particularly kind of like ignited your flame and like your excitement around it?
So this will give you an example of just all the different things I'm into. I am like so far into woodworking right now that I'm just having a blast doing that. Like the pandemic hit, and I'd done like a few like DIY things around the house and stuff like that before, but the pandemic hit, and I'm like, well, I'm going to be spending a lot of time at home. I got a garage now, I'm kind of settled into an area for a little while, which I hadn't been for, I was always kind of vagabonding around, and had a little extra money, from working for Mark. So I was like, why not? Started watching a bunch of YouTube videos, started buying tools, and I got like super into building furniture, for friends and family around my house and stuff like
Dude,
that.
I saw the I think it's like a table or a desk or something like that on your Instagram. It looks really good, man. It's some top quality stuff.
Yeah, there's all sorts of courses and stuff out there that you can take, online, especially now. Like a lot of these woodworking places that offered courses before the pandemic, they were hit by that, so they started doing online courses. And they're like, funny enough, it's this guy from Santiago, Chile, who did the one that. I ended up doing some of the design on that work, but he kind of showed you how to make cabinets like that, and yeah. It's been awesome. It's something that gets me away from screens and keyboards, that I just need, and I need to disconnect. I need to work with my body and my hands and shut that off for a little while. I don't know what'll come of it. If I ever, I've been just building stuff for friends and family right now. It's been a lot of fun designing them and building them and figuring out how to do some of that stuff. So it's, that's just a small taste of my varied interests, I guess. So yeah,
that's super cool. My brother recently got into woodwork. I mean, he's studying architecture, and so I think there's some kind of connection there. But he actually just got hired by one of my friends, one of my mom's good friends, just to build like a custom furniture piece as well. So it's funny that it's becoming more of a thing.
That guy I took the course from, his name's Patricio Ortega. He's in Santiago, Chile. He was an architect, and now he's like a furniture maker, woodworker. And he definitely talks about all the crossover from architecture to, especially the design elements and stuff like that. We take kind of principles of a building design and put them into a piece of furniture. It's kind of interesting. So,
super cool. My last question, I want to ask you any lessons you've learned from working with Mark, as far as like either direct just advice from him, but also a lot of the times it's you learn from like kind of just working with someone or observing. So I just want to hear what you're so far in like 6-7 years of working with him. What have you been your biggest lessons?
Well, I think a couple of things. One that might kind of directly relate to anyone who listens to this is that you should. I think you should always kind of be punching above your weight in a way. So, for example, what I mean is that I honestly don't read self-development blogs. I work on a self-development blog, but I don't really read a lot of other people's stuff. I'll read a few things here and there, but nothing real consistent. I mean, and Mark is, I think, the same way. We read books. We read like hardcore, philosophy, and he does a lot of the philosophy anyway. I do more of the science side still, and some, kind of cultural stuff every now and then too, economics and that kind of stuff. But if you want to go to somebody and you want to like kind of impress them in any way, you need to be able to kind of punch above your weight, or punch above the weight that they're punching at anyway. And so for Mark, it was I could go through some hardcore, really boring, dry research and not blink, that kind of thing. And I saw that in his work though too. He's out here reading Nietzsche and Jean-Paul Sartre and like all that kind of stuff. And just in anything you're doing, I don't even think that just if you're running a blog or whatever it is, you should be looking for what's the next level up, right? So he takes all of those lessons he learns from that kind of thing and he tries to distill them into an email, right? Yeah. Like that to me is a fascinating thing you can do. And right now, I think that's an awesome way in the world. There's so much information out there. If you're somebody who wants to go create their own thing, whether it's a side project or whatever, there's so much information out there that needs to be organized and distilled. And that's what Mark does, And so the way he does that, again, is by kind of punching above his weight. And so I think that's a big thing that I learned from Mark was that there's always that other level, and you can kind of look to that level for sure for inspiration and everything like that. The other thing is probably really kind of obvious to anyone, especially anyone who's probably listening to a podcast like this, is that the way you think about things really, really does matter. Like it it really matters. It could be the only thing that matters at a certain level, right? Because that's your life at a certain point, right? The way you see the world, the way you think about things, that's you. That's life. And the way you approach things, whether it's the way you see time, the way you see money, the way you see relationships, that kind of thing, that really, really, really matters. And I think at the end of the day, too, that's kind of what Mark and almost everybody in this industry is trying to get at. And we're trying all these different angles to kind of come in and try to get people to understand that in a way. And I see it constantly in my own life where I'm having a problem. I'm like, oh, it's because I'm thinking of it this way. I need to maybe try a different way. And, you know, somebody, for instance, somebody who's really good about that with, say, money, which is kind of a more concrete example I can give you. Ramit Sethi, right? Yeah. Like, I think he's awesome. That if that's considered personal development, I'll read some Ramit Sethi every now and then, because with money especially, he's just like, oh, this is how people think about it? Well, that's fucking stupid. Don't think about it that way. Think about it this way. And it's like, oh yeah, why wouldn't you? That's a concrete example to illustrate my point that just, you know, it's everything. Your mindset and the way you approach things is everything. Does it solve everything? No, I'm not saying that, but it goes so far. And just seeing how Mark thinks, working with somebody like that. Mark, I'll say this right now too. Mark, I would say 98, 99% of the time, he's a normal dude. Super normal, chill, kind of, you know, just a dude, right? But it's those 1 or 2% of the things that he does consistently and the way he thinks about them that really sets him apart. And so that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned from him, definitely, is to really be careful about where you let your mind go, for sure. Yeah,
I think that's super important to highlight. Like, the fact that these people, I mean, these people you whose content you consume, like, are just regular people. And I think that's one of the values that I've personally found from, like, working with these people that I looked up to, is like realizing that they're human and that they're just like, they're regular people with flaws as well, you know, and like, and they're just doing, like you said, like they have certain habits that they repeat over and over consistently that just allows them to, like, stack the wins until they get to where they are, right? And I think that realizing that they're normal, and that kind of, like, opens up a whole universe to you. You're like, oh, if they can do it, then I mean, I can do it too, you know?
Oh, it absolutely does. And I think more than anything, the habit they're in is just consistency of whatever they're doing, right? It's just, it like, that's what I noticed early on too, like when I was running social media. It wasn't that we were putting out great social media content. It's just that it was consistent. It was consistent, and it was, people knew what it was going to be. And I mean, it was good quality content, but it might not have just been amazing, you know, but we were just consistent enough in it and just kept plugging away and kept experimenting and everything like that, eventually you find what works. And there's a handful of things that work really well and a handful that don't, and everything in between. But that's one of the best habits to get into, for sure. It's just consistency.
Yeah. Amen. Well, man, I really appreciate you doing this. Where can people find you online if they want to check out any work that you've done?
So I've alluded to this a little bit, but I'm not really big on social media anymore. I think running social media
jaded you.
in the time that I did, because I oversaw that transition from, like I said, the golden years of Facebook till, like, you know, the 2016 elections basically just ruined social media for me, and I just never really looked back, honestly. I mean, I'm on Instagram. It's just, my handle is just @Drew Birnie. It's BIRNIE. You know, I post dogs and woodwork and mountains. There's nothing special. You can definitely, you know, like, I do have a website where you can contact me. It's basically a glorified portfolio with a contact form. It's drewbirnie.com.
Do you still work with people for writing, if anyone is interested in that?
Yeah, I do. I take on select projects. That's kind of the other thing I've been, I used to freelance a lot and kind of do a lot of side gigs, and I'd take on a lot of work that, you know, I maybe not saying I shouldn't have, but I probably didn't have
Yeah.
to. And I've gotten to the point now where I'm like, I'm going to be kind of selective with who I work with, and I really need to work with them. I have done, like I said, I've done some work with people over this past year, not just Paul, but a couple other people that I've worked with. So yeah, if anybody wants to reach out, and if it's a good fit, we'll go from there. And yeah,
100%. Oh man, thank you for doing this. Really appreciate it, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to learn
This is a lot of fun.
and get some value out of this. There you have it. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I'd love your feedback. You can hit me up on Instagram at Jeremy John Mary. If you enjoyed the episode, I really appreciate if you can leave me a review on iTunes, or even just drop a comment below if you're listening on YouTube. All right, until the next episode, have an amazing week.